Welcome to the Year in Sports 2018 edition. I'm Ron Burgundy.
I'm Veronica Corningstone, and this is the Eagles Sports News. In Holy Toledo, do we have a good show for you? Wow, what a time to be alive, right, Ron?
That's right, Veronica. We have seen an unfathomable amount of choking under pressure this year, for sure.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Ron.
Our producers have put together a video for y'all. Let's take a look.
This is an excruciating thing to have to watch. That's a putt from Ernie Els on the first hole. And by the time Ernie is done, he's six putting from less than 2 feet.
Unfortunately, that's happened.
He gathers himself, and I can't even imagine how the wheels are spinning in your brain. This is the first hole, and he's not even touching the hole, and then here.
And those are just a few examples of the many athletes that choked under pressure. Because of the increase in choking under pressure that has been seen within these athletes, we brought in two researchers, Dr. Champkin and Dr. Brick Tamlin, to explain why choking under pressure occurs within athletes.
Surely, everyone has experienced instances where the consequences of their performance outcome are heightened. Some individuals may even notice their performance worsen under levels of increased pressure. This can occur in all areas of life, including school, work, or while playing sports. Our researcher Baumeister defined choking as the presence of less than ideal performance in high-stakes situations. In understanding pressure, Baumeister conducted research which demonstrated that competition, existence of an audience, punishments or rewards, and ego relevance contributed to experiences of both increased pressure and worsened performance.
Later this special edition, we will be interviewing two researchers with competing views about why choking under pressure occurs. These researchers looked at the self-focus theory and the distraction theory and just tried to decide which one is a better explanation for why choking under pressure occurs. Hi, Dr. Brick and Dr. Champ. Thank you guys for coming on here talking about your research.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us. It's a real opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, we're really excited, just really blessed to be here. Thanks for having us on the show.
So, tell me a little bit about why you guys decided to do research on choking under pressure within athletes.
Yeah, so over the past year, there's been a lot of choking occurring in professional athletes, and we thought it would be ideal and interesting to do some research and share with the public why that might be occurring. And there's been two primary theories that have been used previous in past research, those being the self-focus theory and the distraction theory.
Yeah, so that was a great intro there, Brick. I guess it just started that one day, watching the game together, having a couple beers, and we just wanted to know why this happens, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
it's so common, and it's really frustrating not having these answers.
Yeah, and previous research has supported both the distraction theory and self-focus theory. This has led to a contradiction regarding which one better explains the phenomenon of choking under pressure and the mechanisms surrounding it.
So you brought up the two theories, the self-focus theory and the distraction theory. Can you guys give me a little bit of a background on what those two theories are?
Yeah, we sure can. So, I guess I'll start with the self-focus theory. Basically, it just says that when you're under pressure, it causes you to shift your attention inwards toward yourself. So you think a little bit more about what you're actually doing. So in the videos, we saw the golfers and the kickers, and these guys are pros. You know, they've done this their whole lives. So the skills should be pretty automatic, but under additional pressure, they start thinking about the actual movements and the procedure of carrying out the task, and that's what causes them to mess up.
Distraction theory states that an athlete has a magnitude of pressures coming from the environment. Their attention is then taken from the task at hand to all those outside pressures. This fills up the working memory, which has a limited amount of space, and they don't have enough mental resources to focus on both the process and the external environment, leading to choking under pressure.
So you guys talked about past research into the self-focus theory and the distraction theory. Can you give me a little bit of insight into those previous research?
Yeah, we definitely can. That's a great question. So back in 2001, some of our colleagues performed a study on what underlies choking under pressure in a putting task with expert and beginner golfers. Basically, the first two experiments tested the golfer's basic knowledge and episodic memory using subjective recall of a specific putt. So with that said, it was found that the experienced golfers relied on procedural memory, sort of something that I was talking about earlier, how it's sort of automatic. This was attributed to them having more practice, basically, and they just have more well-learned knowledge on the task of putting itself than do the beginner golfers. So this portion of the study adds to the research out there that says that highly trained skills are encoded within an individual's procedural memory and eventually do become automatic. So basically, since these tasks are procedural and they require little attention, the accuracy should not be affected by multiple things in the environment, which is something that distraction theory claims. So that's kind of what we found to support self-focus theory, and I know Dr. Brick can talk a little bit more about the distraction theory research. Yeah, so that research was more related to the self-focus theory, but as we were really digging in, we wanted to find some research on distraction theory too. So some of our colleagues back in 2014 conducted a study using semi-pro tennis players. Interestingly, they assigned the players to be in either an anxiety group or a neutral group. They then completed 10 continuous serves to specific areas on the court as dictated by the researchers, and their accuracy was then measured. So we've got these participants in the neutral group only being told where to serve the ball, and then in the anxiety group, they were told where to serve the ball and that they will be evaluated by tennis experts in order to induce some additional anxiety in them. So with that said, the participants' level of state anxiety was measured right before serving the ball to sort of get a baseline. And then after performing the serving task, their level of focus was measured just by asking them a few questions. This is what we call self-report data. And then researchers found that the results highlighted a negative relationship between anxiety and accuracy of serves, but that this was not a mediator in decreasing accuracy. Instead, the self-reported levels of distraction was found to mediate accuracy and anxiety. So again, since accuracy and anxiety and the experts' external evaluation of the tennis players, these findings really fit into distraction theory and the whole distraction explaining choking under pressure, because the experts are something out there in the environment, taking those measurements and inducing additional anxiety within the participants.
So what you're saying is there's a lot of research supporting both theories.
Yeah, you know, as with anything in psychology, it really depends, and we were kind of frustrated with that, so Dr. Brick and I set out to really get to the bottom of it with our own study.
So now that we've hit on some key past research, can you guys tell me a little bit about the methodology that you guys use in your current research?
Yeah, we'd love to. So just to sort of set the stage for it, a lot of research is focused on golfers and tennis, but not so much with NFL players and kickers kickers specifically, especially this year since so many of them have been missing what look like easy kicks. Yeah, we used NFL kickers and high school kickers, and then Brick here can tell you a little bit more about our exact.
Yeah, so we used 30 professional kickers and we put them into one condition, and then we also used 30 high school kickers, but the high school kickers had to be on college scholarship or being looked at by colleges. In order for the stereotype threat to work, the person has to perceive themselves as being good at the task. So someone who's kicking in high school and has a college scholarship is probably someone who is good or wants to be good, so they could fall victim to the stereotype threat.
Yeah, and so basically we gathered all these kickers up. We took them indoors, kicking at a dome. They were all right-footed. That way there were no wind or anything like that. They kicked into standard width uprights, 18 feet and 6 inches wide. Our first study, we actually had 4 different conditions based on their level of expertise and then whether or not they were exposed to a stereotype threat. So then we had each group kick a field goal from 9 different starting positions, broken down into 3 distances for a total of 18 tries. So just for a quick example, distance 1 would be kicked from the left hash mark, the middle, and the right hash mark, as would commonly happen in a game. The order of the kicks were randomized to control for what we call practice effects. And then basically each participant kicked 18 preliminary kicks to sort of get us a baseline. And then we'll score their performance by calculating their average distance from the center that they miss. And then after the preliminary kicks, both groups will take 18 more kicks, and then that'll give us a score to compare. So in sum, we've got the 36 kicks and the two conditions, the stereotype threat or just the control group. So the stereotype that we tried to prime with them is telling them that previous research has shown left-footed kickers make many more field goals than right-footed kickers. And then we'll tell them that, and they'll complete their second round of the 18 kicks, which then we'll use to compare. And Dr. Brick here is going to tell us about what we expected to find with these studies.
Yes, like Dr. Champ said, we were measuring the accuracy of the kickers, and one condition didn't have the stereotype threat, and the other did have the stereotype threat. And our hypothesis was the performance accuracy scores of both professional and high school kickers would be worse after receiving the stereotype threat. Just as a way for us to test and see does stereotype threat actually lead towards performance, and that will lead into our second experiment that we'll go over now.
So after our first study, we ironed out some kinks. We wanted to build on it too. So we still use the same thing, stereotype threat, 36 total kicks, and then this time we added a single task and a dual task condition. The single task, we just asked them to kick the field goal like normal, and then the dual task, they were also asked to complete a verbal task while kicking. So each participant was played a recording of words while they completed the field goal attempts. Before hearing the recording, we asked them to listen for certain words. For example, left and miss. Each time they hear these words, they're asked to repeat them out loud. And then the words left and better were also used to remind the participants of the stereotype. The stereotype from our first study being previous research has shown left-footed kickers make many more field goals than do right-footed kickers. So now that you kind of understand the exact design and methodology, Brick here is going to tell you about the results.
So the hypotheses from the second experiment Dr. Champ just explained were professional kickers' performance accuracy scores would be significantly better while in the dual task condition. And high school kickers, their performance would be significantly worse while placed in a dual task condition. And we tie that back to the self-focus theory and distraction theory. If you remember correctly, the distraction theory, the more tasks you have, the more full your working memory becomes, and there's a cap on your working memory. So high school athletes should perform worse because that procedure of kicking the ball is not fully put into procedural memory. Where professional athletes, this is something that's natural to them, it's completely proceduralized, so having that extra task should take their attention away from the stereotype and they should actually perform better. And that would provide evidence for the self-focus theory.
So as a result of your study, what have you guys found?
So we're actually still shifting through the data, but today we'll run you through if our results were to support our hypothesis and if our results were not to support our hypothesis for both experiment 1 and experiment 2. So I'm going to give it over to Dr. Champ, and he can talk to you about the results hypothetically for experiment 1.
Yeah, so just a quick flashback. Experiment 1, 36 kicks, stereotype threat or not. So if the results we find support the hypothesis that amateur and professional kicker accuracy will decrease when exposed to a stereotype, the results would look like this. So kickers in the control group would be way more accurate than kickers who experience the stereotype threat. If we found this, it would support research done by some colleagues back in 2006 indicating that stereotype threat does indeed affect performance accuracy of kickers by adding pressure to the situation. Now, if our results did not support the hypothesis, they would show that there would be no real difference visible in the kicking between the control groups and the stereotype threat groups. These results would go against what our colleagues found in 2006 and suggest that stereotype threat does not add any pressure to the situation. So would you want to tell them about experiment 2?
Yeah, so for experiment 2, our hypothesis were professional athletes would perform better in the dual task condition, and amateur athletes, the high school athletes, would perform worse in the dual task condition. If our hypotheses are supported, we will have found evidence to say that someone who has proceduralized this task of kicking a field goal, it is better to use the self-focus theory to explain why they're choking under pressure. And if our hypotheses are not supported, we would have no evidence saying that self-focus theory is better for professional athletes and distraction theory is better used to explain why choking under pressure occurs in high school athletes. In addition to what I just said, if our hypotheses weren't supported for experiment 2, we would be able to say that distraction theory might be a better theory to say why professional athletes and amateur athletes choke while under pressure, because they performed worse in that dual task condition, hinting at their working memory was overloaded, and this is why they choked.
So now that we've gone over your hypothetical results, how can you guys go about this in the future?
Yeah, so say experiment 1, our hypotheses are supported. We now know and would be able to say and tell future researchers that stereotype threat is something that can be used to induce pressure, and stereotype threat can be brought into the choking under pressure research more than it is now. If for some reason our hypotheses are not supported for experiment 1, then researchers should really try and understand why sometimes does stereotype threat raise pressure, induce pressure-like situations, and why does sometimes it not do that.
Yeah, and then, we do have some limitations of the current study to be careful and keep in mind. So we only used kicking and football. We didn't really delve into golf at all, although golf has been the subject of a lot of research in choking under pressure. And then, we had the kickers just come in and kick on one day, so there was only a brief snapshot of their skill levels. And then, in addition to that, we would like to have a bigger sample.
Yeah.
And work with some colleagues from different sports and do it that way, just to be a little more concrete. And then also just the nature of choking under pressure, mental processes, they're still pretty hard to pin down exactly what's going on and when things are happening. So, but we'll stick with it and keep doing our research.
So if our experiment 2 hypotheses are supported, future researchers should try and understand what type of interventions and strategies can be used for both professional athletes and amateur athletes. For professional athletes, these interventions and strategies should be based off of the self-focus theory. And for amateur athletes, these interventions and strategies should be based on the distraction theory. And these interventions should help them alleviate the stress or the anxiety or pressure, which will allow them to perform better in key and pressured situations. If our hypotheses from experiment 2 are not supported, future researchers should try to understand in what context self-focus theory or distraction theory better explains why an athlete chokes under pressure. They should also try and understand the mediators or moderators that are relevant to explaining when self-focus theory or distraction theory would take place and could be used to better explain why an athlete chokes.
So thank you guys for coming in today. We really appreciate you sharing your research with us, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks for letting us come in.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity, and we'll be look forward to coming back on the show sometime.
Absolutely.
So as you can see, there's a lot of factors that go into explaining why choking under pressure occurs. Dr. Brick and Dr. Champ, we're looking at which theory better explains choking under pressure.
The research points towards the self-focus theory being more of the reason why choking under pressure happens for professional athletes, and their results show that the distraction theory shows that amateur athletes can choke under pressure.
Further research does need to be done in order to further explain exactly which theory better explains choking under pressure within different situations.
And as always, you stay classy, lacrosse.